The Alaska Highway is more than just a road. It's a testament to human determination and ingenuity, carved through some of the most unforgiving terrain on the continent. Built during World War II as a strategic military supply route, it has since evolved into a vital artery for the people who call Alaska home. Today, it stands as a lifeline connecting Alaska to the rest of the United States, threading through vast stretches of wilderness and linking remote communities to the outside world. Stretching nearly 1,400 miles through rugged wilderness, the highway is a vital corridor for goods, people, and opportunity. It weaves through snow-capped mountains, dense forests, and icy rivers, braving the elements year-round to keep Alaska connected. Trucks haul everything from fresh produce and medical supplies to critical oil industry parts and heavy machinery, supporting not just daily life but the very backbone of Alaska's economy. These deliveries ensure Alaskan shelves are stocked, hospitals are supplied, and industries keep running, even in the harshest winter months. While most cargo arrives by sea, the highway is the only route for what's urgent and high value. Goods that can't wait for the next ship, like life-saving medicines, perishable foods, and emergency equipment. International agreements have long kept this artery open, symbolizing decades of cooperation and trust between the U.S. and Canada, and ensuring the free flow of trade and travel. But now, a trade dispute threatens to turn this symbol of unity into a flashpoint, putting Alaska's fragile supply chain at risk, and raising fears of shortages and delays. The reliable flow of traffic is suddenly in jeopardy, and communities on both sides of the border are bracing for impact, uncertain of what the coming weeks will bring. For Alaskans, the highway's importance is about more than commerce. It's about survival in the far north, where isolation can mean life or death. As tensions rise and uncertainty grows, the fate of this critical link, and the people who depend on it, hangs in the balance. The current crisis began with President Trump's threat of sweeping 25% tariffs on all Canadian and Mexican imports. This bold move was part of his administration's broader effort to renegotiate trade deals and put America first. The announcement came suddenly, catching many off guard and sending immediate ripples through international markets. For Canada, this was more than a policy shift. It was an economic threat that could devastate industries from timber to agriculture. The Canadian economy, deeply intertwined with the U.S., relies heavily on cross-border trade. Sectors like lumber, dairy, and auto parts face the possibility of steep new costs, putting thousands of jobs at risk. The announcement sent shockwaves through Canadian businesses, forcing leaders to consider how to respond. Boardrooms across the country buzzed with urgent meetings as executives scrambled to assess the potential fallout. Small business owners, already operating on thin margins, worried about their future. Trump's unpredictable approach left everyone in limbo, with tariffs delayed but not withdrawn. Markets reacted with volatility, and uncertainty became the new normal. The lack of clear communication from Washington only heightened anxieties on both sides of the border. Canadian officials scrambled to prepare for the worst, determined to show they wouldn't accept unfair treatment. Emergency meetings were called, and policymakers debated how best to protect Canadian interests. The government faced mounting pressure to stand firm and defend national industries. The core issue, Trump's tariffs as leverage versus Canada's commitment to rules-based trade, became a flashpoint. The threat to disrupt the flow of goods across the world's longest undefended border put decades of cooperation at risk. For Canada, these tariffs weren't just numbers, they were a direct challenge to decades of partnership. The North American Free Trade Agreement, once a symbol of economic unity, now seemed fragile. Many Canadians wondered if the trust built over generations could survive this test. The threat forced Canada to rethink its relationship with its largest trading partner. Workers, families, and communities braced for the impact, uncertain about what the future would hold if the tariffs became reality. The stage was set for a showdown that would test the resilience of cross-border ties and force both nations to confront the true cost of economic conflict. Canada's response was swift and united. Prime Minister Trudeau announced retaliatory tariffs, but the real shock came from the provinces. British Columbia proposed tolls on commercial trucks heading to Alaska, targeting the crucial highway. Provincial agencies stopped buying American products and liquor stores pulled U.S. brands from their shelves. Ontario slapped a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S., aiming at integrated energy markets. Yukon joined in, restricting U.S. companies from government contracts and halting American liquor imports. This coordinated pushback showed Canada's willingness to leverage its own economic power. The message was clear: Canada would defend its interests using every tool available. The trade dispute had become a national cause, with every region playing its part. For Alaska, British Columbia's proposed tolls were a wake-up call. The state had long depended on the Alaska Highway as its lifeline to the rest of North America, a vital artery that kept goods, fuel, and food flowing north. Suddenly, the security of that connection was in question, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The state's reliance on the highway for urgent, high-value goods made it uniquely vulnerable. Every day, hundreds of trucks crossed the border, carrying everything from medical supplies to groceries, construction materials, and fuel. For many communities, especially those far from Anchorage or Fairbanks, these deliveries are a matter of survival, not just convenience. Trucking groups warned that new costs would hit families and businesses hard, raising prices on essentials. In a state where the cost of living is already among the highest in the nation, even a small increase in transportation costs can ripple through the economy, making basic goods even less affordable for ordinary Alaskans. Alaska's oil industry, dependent on just-in-time deliveries, faced the risk of costly delays. Any disruption to the flow of equipment or parts could halt production, threatening jobs and state revenue. The energy sector, a backbone of Alaska's economy, suddenly found itself at the mercy of international negotiations. State Senator Robert Myers, a trucker himself, called the tolls a direct threat to Alaska's economy. He argued that the proposed fees would not only burden truckers, but also undermine the state's independence and resilience. Myers became a leading voice, rallying both lawmakers and citizens to defend Alaska's access to the outside world. The free passage through Canada, once taken for granted, was suddenly in doubt. For decades, the open border had symbolized cooperation and trust between neighbors. Now Alaskans faced the unsettling reality that this access could be restricted or come at a steep price. The dispute exposed Alaska's isolation and dependence on international goodwill. With no alternative routes by land, the state's unique geography left it exposed to decisions made far beyond its borders, highlighting just how fragile its connections truly are. What started as a distant trade fight now threatened daily life in the last frontier. Families worried about empty shelves, business owners feared higher costs, and communities braced for shortages. The uncertainty seeped into every corner of Alaskan society. The highway's future was no longer certain, and Alaskans braced for real consequences. The sense of vulnerability was palpable, as residents watched the news and gathered in town halls, searching for answers and reassurance. The political battle had become a personal crisis for the state. What happened next would determine not just the cost of goods, but the very fabric of life in Alaska, as its people faced an uncertain road ahead. Alaskan leaders called for calm, urging federal negotiators to resolve the dispute before it hurt ordinary people and disrupted daily life across the state. Governor Dunleavy warned against making Alaska collateral damage in a larger trade war, emphasizing the unique challenges the state already faces. Business groups painted a grim picture: higher costs, disrupted supply chains, and immediate pain for families who rely on steady access to goods. The threat of tolls felt real. Trucks could be stopped and charged at existing way stations, slowing deliveries and raising prices. For many Alaskans, the highway was more than a road. It was a symbol of connection, security, and the freedom to move goods and people. The dispute forced everyone to consider just how fragile that connection really was, sparking difficult conversations in every community. Anxiety grew as the possibility of a more expensive, complicated supply line became real for families and businesses alike. The conversation shifted from politics to survival as Alaskans braced for the uncertain days ahead. Canadian leaders insisted their actions were about self-defense, not aggression. Premier David Eby argued that tolls were a reluctant but necessary response to U.S. tariffs. Yukon's Premier Pillai echoed the need to stand up for Canada, even as he acknowledged close ties with Alaskans. The principle was reciprocity. If the U.S. imposed tariffs, Canada would reconsider its own cooperation. Access to the Alaska Highway and energy exports were now bargaining chips. The goal was to pressure the U.S. back to the negotiating table, not to punish ordinary Americans. Canadian leaders stressed their desire for dialogue but made clear they wouldn't be bullied. The message: Canada values partnership, but will defend its interests when pushed. As of August 15, 2025, the situation remains unresolved. The proposed tolls haven't been enacted, but the threat lingers, casting a shadow over Alaska's supply chain. The highway's vulnerability, whether from politics or accidents, has never been clearer. The best hope is a diplomatic solution that restores stability and trust. But if tariffs go forward, Canada's countermeasures will follow, deepening the rift. The stakes are high economic disruption, rising costs, and a chill in cross-border relations. This dispute is a stark lesson in global interdependence, how distant decisions can hit home. The Alaska Highway story is now about more than transport. It's about the fragile balance of diplomacy and trade. The choices made now will decide if this border remains a symbol of cooperation, or becomes a new front in a costly trade war.